And we are back after the defense has met with Sarah Boone. The judge has questions for her. Has she discussed with her attorneys if she would like to testify? Yes. Does she need additional time to discuss this with her attorneys? No. Have attorneys discussed the potential benefits and harm of testifying? Yes. Are you satisfied with the advice of your counsels? Yes. You understand the attorneys can't force you to testify? Yes. You understand the court can't force you to testify? Yes. Do you understand it is your decision and your decision alone? Yes. Do you understand you could ignore counsel advice because it is your choice alone? Yes. Do you understand you have the right to remain silent? Yes. Did you hear me explain to the jury about the right to remain silent? Yes. Before the jury does their deliberation, if you do not testify, we will read another instruction to the jury about not holding this against you or to consider you not testifying. Would you like me to read that instruction? Yes, the judge read the jury instruction. The judge asked if she had any questions about this instruction. No. The judge asked if she understands she is waiving her right to silence if she testifies. Yes. Once you begin answering questions, you must answer all unless the judge instructs you otherwise. Do you understand? Yes. You can't pick and choose what to answer. Do you understand? Yes. If you refuse, you can get sanctions, be held in contempt, have testimony strike. The jury might be told not to consider your testimony. Do you understand? Yes. If you testify, you will be subject to cross-examination and impeachment. The state can ask about any felony convictions or convictions of dishonesty. Do you understand? Yes. Are you aware of any such convictions? Yes. The judge refers to the state, and the state says they think she's saying she understands, but she doesn't have those convictions. Sarah confirms. The state will not be allowed to inquire because there are no convictions. Have you had enough time to discuss if you will testify? Yes. Do you need additional time? No. Have you been threatened to testify? No. Have any promises been made to testify? No. Are you doing this voluntarily? Yes. Have you been forced, threatened, or coerced to testify? No. Would you like to testify or not testify? And she says, testify. Let's see what I put here. You've conversed with your lawyers. I want you to converse with your lawyers again to be sure with the strategy your defense has made, including you testifying first. She said, I understand. I want to remind you, you can change your mind before the jury comes back in. Yes, the state speaks saying there should be testimony about an overt act before testimony of past violence or other things that come with self-defense. Now, if you watched my live feed where I was in the comments last night covering the case, someone said that they thought that the overt act had been established already, and I said, as far as I'm aware, no, that it hasn't, and they're going to make that argument in court, and we're continuing here on that train, that same idea. The state is going with the idea that there is no overt act. Let me repeat again. The state says that there should be testimony about an overt act before testimony of past violence or other things can come with self-defense. The judge says that Holland case speaks for itself. So the judge is not saying Sarah Boone doesn't have an overt act. He's not saying that. But is he implying it? That's kind of the question. I think so. Owen says he has 3 issues. One is Holland. They have gloves. They want to look at the suitcase. And third, the state's motion about a camera and maybe see that before she testifies. Owens walks up with photos of injuries that Sarah Boone has. Says they were from George Torres, and there's a disagreement about an overt act. Owen says during the interrogation, the detectives mentioned prior instances of violence, so that door is open. The state introduced that. Owen says that Sarah felt they exposed it because the officers had those videos on the laptop. Owen submits that state has opened the door to prior bad acts, and he has a lot of photographs. The state responded. State's response, and the state just says they hope the court maintains their ruling. They've already established police can tell her things to get reactions. She denied there was an overt act that night and through pretrial, and they have reviewed her most recent statements, and there still isn't an overt act said by Sarah. And the state says they're hopeful that you will maintain the ruling, and we don't know how it prejudices her to explain the overt act before prior acts are shown. The judge just doesn't agree with the defense. The overt acts must be established. The door is not open. Owens says he needs photos marked. Owens and Sarah need to look at the suitcase and bat. State response is they don't know why he didn't do this for the nearly half hour, at least to get things marked. It is 11:25. We need to try this case, which is fair. It's fair. I mean, you're probably I think a lot of people are going to watch this video for Sarah Boone's testimony and be wondering where it is, right? A lot happened. The judge asked, why wasn't this done? And Owen says he's been busy with his client discussing her rights to testify. The judge is concerned with time. Owen suggests an early lunch. If Sarah's testimony ends before 5, they have some witnesses. Do an abundance of caution. He needs to go over evidence with Sarah. And it sounds like Owens is, I know this is going to shock you. You're going to be shocked. They might be unprepared with witnesses. They only have a couple today. Sounds like they might be missing some between now and Friday. So it sounds like there might be some early days in there because the defense isn't ready. Shocker. Just shocker. The judge has him approach. And ends up being the jury is brought in and then released for lunch. So another short update. The defense is unprepared in all things, at all times. I don't know what else to tell you. Everyone seems mad at Sarah. There's still the issue of an overt act. I'm expecting, I mentioned this last night in the chat, I'm expecting that Sarah is going to get on the stand. She's going to talk about, it made me think of when he choked me. And the state's going to object, and her entire defense might crumble at that very moment. If you're wondering, is Sarah doing her like baby talk voice that's completely different than all of the other recorded testimony? Yeah. I think she was practicing when she was responding to the judge. See you in the next clip. We are back. Sarah Boone is testifying first and will be sworn in front of the jury. State says the redactions are done, gave them to the defense, and I thought we were ready to go, but the defense has a couple issues as is standard. He starts to mention another attorney, but that attorney walks in. Owen says for reasons to present his photos. He wants to show the photos. Sarah in the video said, that is how I feel when you choke me. That is how I feel when you cheat on me. Sarah is expressing her anger, and I should be allowed to elaborate on what she is saying when she says she chokes me. State's response, they should be able to bring that in after they bring in the overt act. Motion denied. Relying on Supreme Court's guidance. Second argument is about what a reasonable person would do if a reasonable person would perceive the overt act witnessed by Sarah Boone if it would be perceived by someone as an overt act. And you need to know the history of violence, and from the evidence that you have presented, if you take that, what she said at various times, she became concerned when he came back from Publix with that second bottle of wine because George Torres gets a certain level of intoxication. Sometimes he can be violent. I know that's kind of like mixy up there, might be confusing. The defense doesn't make a lot of sense to me. To me, it sounded like at this point they're arguing that because George got a second bottle of wine, they should be allowed to say he was violent. And maybe even they're trying to like feel out the waters. Could that be the overt act? Sarah knew when he brought home that second bottle of wine, she knew it wouldn't be a good night. She tried to keep him occupied. She knew he might act on her in a violent way. She will testify to the overt act and her past with him. She was hypersensitive to danger and fear. That should be allowed in collectively as part of the overt act to block the attack, physically restrain George Torres, and use the bat to keep George Torres into the suitcase. The judge asked the basis of the opinion of about to be attacked if predicated by prior instances of violence is correct. Owen says there was an overt act by George Torres. The judge asks, what are you asking me to do? As I said, the judge is even confused. What do you want? Owen says to let me elicit from Sarah Boone that she was concerned after the second bottle, and that is why she tried to placate him, and is why she had a heightened sense that he was capable due to his extreme of intoxication, that he might be violent against her. So again, right there, I really think that this was their like big plan, new overt act, and we'll continue on. You'll see how that fell. She said he doesn't remember the next day. She loves the man. She wants to marry him. She is tired of being beat on. It ties into her behavior. The reason she was so confident is because she knew he couldn't get to her. She can tell him exactly what he does that hurts her and how she feels. It's all tied in with it. And I replayed this multiple times to make sure I heard it right. He struck me first to try to get out of the suitcase, and she reacts the way she does. I re-listened to it multiple times. I listened to it on the captions. He struck me first is what I thought I heard. The captions thought they heard. If it's wrong, let me know in the chat. Let me know in the comments. I find this interesting. I'm going to spoil it a little bit. Sarah Boone does not argue he struck me first, trying to get out as the reason for the overt act. She doesn't say that on the stand. And she also doesn't say the overt act is just his hand coming out, his fingers coming out, his 2 fingers. She's changed quite a bit. So just remember that as we go. I personally feel this whole thing is the defense trying to play up and try different possible overt acts she could say in her story, and then changing the story as they need to. State response, we held the arguments already. Nothing new was made. We already know what Sarah Boone said on October 2nd to Dr. Warner, exactly what she said to Dr. Harper over the course of months and years. There was no overt act. It needs to objectively lead to a reasonable person to determine there is fear of injury or death. Her new testimony is generalized fear, and the court already ruled on that. Her testimony is that it was funny until he said, "I can't breathe." Flip the switch, remind of everything he said before, and starts flipping the suitcase and beating him with a bat. Yes, remember this. Her original testimony is it was funny until he said, "I can't breathe." Then she flipped a switch, started moving the suitcase and beating him with the bat. 2 forcible felonies and false imprisonment. You can't start it and then say I'm in fear of retaliation. If I pull a gun on you and say, "Give me everything you own right now," you can't pull a gun on me and I shoot and kill you. I can't use that you pulled a gun and claim self-defense. State concedes if she changes her testimony again, we can cross that bridge. Owen says Sarah hasn't testified. The doctors testified. The judge corrects they gave depositions, not testified. Owen says Sarah hasn't testified, but has consultations with the discussions. Owens disagrees with the state's assessment of Sarah. She has made impeachable statements. He can impeach her. The judge says, talking about him getting the bottles of wine and what led to that is bad acts. You were saying she was apprehensive at the time, which is a part of bad character evidence. This is all prohibited character until an overt act is established. It's an objective standard, not subjective. The judge is relying on Holland. It is a law of the land. The Supreme Court said we must use it. Owens asks that Sarah Boone understands they can't use prior acts until the overt act is established. So basically, Owens wants to make sure, said to the court, that Sarah Boone understands. To me, my personal opinion, this was telling her, change the story, we're going with another plan. The jury is brought in. Sarah Boone is on the witness stand with a little cup of water. She loves her little cups of water. I can't get over that body cam footage. Owens asked Sarah to say where she was born, and she was born in Atlanta. She moved to Florida at 3. Her mother, father, grandparents, brothers. You might be wondering what's the relevance. They're trying to humanize her. She was raised in Orlando, lived in Orange County the whole time, went to high school locally at Edgewater, graduated at 18. Owens says, I know you lost your mother and father in your late teens. State objects, relevance, it got overruled. She lost her grandfather as a sophomore, father as a senior, mother a couple years later, and grandmother soon after. In her 20s, she met Brian Boone. They dated for a handful of years before marriage. Sarah was working to help pay her family's mortgage. Owens asked when they got married. Sarah started to tell a story about her family life and her mother's death. Objection sustained. Owens says just answer the question. Asks if she's nervous. She says yes. Do you remember the date? August 21st, 2004 is when they got married. They lived together shortly before the marriage. They had a child 6 years later, one son, who will be 14th on the 28th of this month. They were married for 13 years. They got divorced. They share custody, split days. She met George Torres when she had decided to buck up and was tired of trying to patch things up with Brian Boone, and went for a walk to have a beer and people watch. This was her on a walk from the marital home, the home that is now sold. Sarah met George before the apartment and met him at a bar across the street and was introduced by a mutual friend. They had a lot in common. Sarah never thought he would be interested in someone like her. He said a lot of nice things. They always had something to talk about. He was handsome, funny, smart. Sarah felt broken from the divorce. He was in Florida because he got divorced. The divorce was settled. Sarah got her own place, lived with her parents, then Brian, then her marital home, then her apartment. So the apartment was the first time Sarah got her own place. Same location as the murder. She wasn't by herself. She was with George. Her husband was trying to buy her out or force her out of the marital home. She rented the home with George. She couldn't afford it on her own. Sarah had monthly income from the divorce but needed more. The agreement was that George would help pay the bills. It wouldn't be an argument. Everything paid first, afterwards fun. They were a couple for years, but at times they lived with parents and talked of breaking up. In a dating phase, he asked Sarah to marry him a couple times, and one time she agreed. So now we go to objection, approach with judge, objection overruled for now. Sort of a long speech breaking it up. They got into that. So basically, she was going to give a big narrative, it sounds like, and then state was like, break it up so we can object if we need to. They got up that morning. George was already downstairs. He wanted to start the day off drinking because it was a day off from his job. She convinced him to clean the house for a sense of accomplishment. They cleaned it up. It was a reward to sit back and enjoy themselves afterwards. Swept, mopped, laundry, dishes. Son was coming next day. She was to pick him up from school the next day at 3. He would be with her that night. The home is 2 bedrooms, the others for her son. 2 or 3 hours to clean. Both smoked cigarettes. Both drink alcohol. Plan was to go with the flow. They made the decision to start drinking. Half a bottle in the refrigerator. She didn't want to go out afterwards, so they went to Publix and got another bottle of wine. She's referring to what we saw shown to the jury in a prior video. They drank the leftover bottle after Publix. They got there with a car. It was about 5 minutes away. It's easier to drive than walk. If they wanted cigarettes, it's easier to walk. George didn't have a car, and it was paid with Sarah's debit card. Once they started drinking, they spent most of the time on the back porch because they can smoke outside, no smoking indoors. They had pets, 2 dogs, Penny and Tess, red Boston Terriers, both disabled. One is blind, the other is deaf. I'm sorry if I'm going too fast. I'm sure they're back already in court. I'm doing this in the break in between. I'm really trying to not go fast, but I'm excited to see how this goes. Even if they allow what she has to say, which you're going to get to, I don't think it's going to go well. Sarah and George were just trying to enjoy the day together. They didn't have a lot of money. They were homebodies. They were outside a few hours. They played darts, drank, enjoyed each other's company. Both looking for a job, both encouraging, supporting, planning. George had a job, but was looking for something new. They were feeling the effects of alcohol. Sarah wanted to come in. She left because George needed a change of scenery. The one thing that really stuck out to me with Sarah's testimony, and it has, it's like she's like ordering George. She controls George. It's very weird to me. Owens asked what they did after coming in, references arts and crafts. Sarah's confused. Owens mentions he knows he later got another bottle of wine. Sarah said she encouraged him to call her daughters. He also has a son. His daughters, Sarah said he also has a son. Sarah had him call outside to boost the mood. First, they didn't answer. First daughter. Second did for a moment. George shared Sarah's phone because George said he didn't have a phone, which is important. A little bit. It was lost or given to him by his mother. She didn't know he had a phone. So it sounds like George had a phone and he wasn't telling Sarah. At least that's what it sounds like she's suggesting. Sarah took a lot of photos and videos that were on the phone, text messages, phone calls. Sarah said they both used the phone for phone calls. She didn't say they used it for messages, though, which is interesting because her defense tried to suggest maybe someone else was sending messages. Sarah didn't mention that. It was the phone seized in the case. They called his brother as well. Sarah lists George's siblings. They live in Florida. George called his brother, and it wasn't a long call. This is the call the brother testified Sarah was yelling in the back something about, "Tell him how you choke me." That was not mentioned. I guess she can't mention it, though, because she was told not to talk about past acts. So that makes sense. After this phone call, Sarah thought George would be better off inside. Sarah thought the day was over, so get ready for the evening and dinner. Sarah doesn't remember the time. George left, said she thought he was walking to the convenience store for cigarettes, but he drove Sarah's car, used her vehicle, got the debit card from Sarah. It was Sarah's card he used, and bought a bottle of wine. Sarah saw the video of that and expected she would drink with him. She agreed it was a regular thing. She came up with entertaining activities for George, a 1,000-piece puzzle. They couldn't find one piece. She wanted to maintain and focus him. She brought paints her son's grandmother bought him. They both liked art. The art was done by them on the wall. Sarah would tell him, "Everything you make is a masterpiece." Paint, drink. Dogs got involved in the dancing. Sarah doesn't like the music George likes and said it wouldn't help the mood, so she put on the radio. The dogs danced with them. Sarah ran out of ideas and wanted to go to bed. Sarah doesn't remember if the bottle was gone. As the day went on, the more they drank, the more they felt the effects. Sarah says they were intoxicated at this point. George tapped her on the knee and said, "You're it." Sarah ran to the shower to hide. Sarah believed he would come to find her. That is not how hide and seek works. Sarah said she waited a while, decided to sleep, went downstairs to find George. Sarah saw him settling into the suitcase while she was on the stairs. It was an old suitcase, George's suitcase. Sarah took it on a trip to see his kids. It was broken, decided to donate it. The suitcase was normally kept upstairs in the closet since they moved in. It was taken downstairs a week or so ago. Wanted to donate some of her son's clothes, some of her and George's clothes. George brought it down. Sarah said, in my head, I said, oh man, we're obviously aren't going to sleep anytime soon. Sarah identifies the suitcase that's in the room with the court. George was small. Sarah says he weighed 98 pounds, and she weighed 98 pounds, but George weighed 100. George weighed 103, and Sarah's weight on her arrest affidavit lists her as 140 pounds. So Sarah, yeah. Sarah is not telling the truth about her weight, at least according to the arrest affidavit. Sarah then says she put on some weight since being incarcerated. I'm assuming that's how they're going to try to cover that. But they were both thin back then. George got in by himself with his own will. He was already in, and Sarah zipped him up. They thought it was funny. They joked about how small he was able to fit in. They laughed about it. It was strange he was small enough to fit in. Sarah said she moved it around a bit, but it was still funny. They both couldn't believe he could fit in. George pulled the top onto himself before she came downstairs. Owens asked if she zipped him up. She said yes. They thought it was funny. They were both laughing. They were still laughing. She moved the suitcase around a couple of times using the wheels. At this point, it was funny, joking, laughing. Owens asked at some point, did she sit down and get her phone? And Sarah says yes, but then Owens says, have I missed something? The suitcase has flipped over, so she thought she had a moment to talk to him while he couldn't get out. Owens asked if he made it so he couldn't get out with the zipper on the bottom. Sarah said it just happened to happen. So she's like, I didn't put it there like that. And then she took advantage of it. Sarah says at that point she decided to video just to see the gist of it, for him to understand. For now, I feel safe and have the ability to speak to you in a manner I normally wouldn't be able to. Sarah was intoxicated and said things she shouldn't have. Sarah realized he couldn't get out and get at her. It went on for about 10 minutes. She heard it today. She heard his voice speaking from the suitcase. It was his voice and her voice on the call. All the words from the man were George. All the words from the woman was Sarah. Sarah said she intended to show him the video the next day. Sarah didn't remember videotaping the next day, but watching it refreshed her memory. Why did you say all that? State objected with approach. Owen says you may proceed. Owen says specifically about the 2-minute part. What are your feelings? Explain that to the jury. So Sarah said she wants all of you to know the majority of the time she is always afraid and always scared. Owen said it would be fair to say you had anger. She said yes. You want to tell him off? Yes, that's the point of the videos and documentation prior. Sarah was asked if she knew he felt uncomfortable. She said, I'm guessing. Sarah said she wanted to have him feel some uncomfort. At some point, she turned off the video, and then we got a second video, 11 minutes later. That was 22 seconds long. George says Sarah one time. Between those videos is 11 minutes. And Owens asked her to fill it in. What happened in those 11 minutes? Sarah said they spoke to each other, and his tone changed. She knew the tone. They argued back and forth. The things he was saying frightened her, cursing at her, threatening her. Owens asked if he wanted him to let her him out of the suitcase, and Sarah said, I assume so. It got heated quickly. He kept pushing on the suitcase for fear he would break out because it was a broken suitcase. His hand started to come through, so she shook the suitcase to get his hand to go back in. She told him to please stop doing this. Please stop doing this to me. Owens confirmed her saying again that his hand was out. Sarah was shaking it to get his hand to go back in, but it didn't, so she tried shaking first. He was trying to forcefully get out. He was angry at her. Owens asked if she was in fear. Sarah said always. Sarah said he likes to used to tell her he would make her unrecognizable or she would lose her life. Sarah lost her grip on the suitcase and said the bat was 2 or 3 feet away. He was trying to get out, so she tried to poke him with the bat. She hit his hand. We've seen the photographs. She says she guesses she caused the bruising. Sarah identified the bat. She said she poked him with it. Sarah explains how she held it, thrusting it at him. His hand, he was still trying to get out, so she tried other parts of the suitcase, hoping his hand would go back inside. Sarah admits she made those injuries and the bruising from the bat. Eventually, his hand went back inside. She believed she prevented him from attacking her. Split-second decision. He was upside down at that point. So what happened? He wasn't cursing or threatening. His hand was inside. He wasn't trying to break through anymore, so she felt safe enough to turn it back over. It wasn't happening anymore. She went to the couch and made the second video. You hear him say Sarah. Sarah says she left enough room for him to get out, zipper to zipper. Asked how much room. She says she doesn't know specifically, but his hand was coming out. So it sounds like she's saying she didn't re-zip it up. After hitting with the bat, he wasn't trying to get out. Sarah believed he could breathe. She thought he could breathe. She wasn't trying to kill him. She never wanted to kill him. She walked upstairs. She didn't let him out because she was terrified. As long as he was in the suitcase, he couldn't harm her. She wanted him to stop being angry because she knows what that means for him, to be angry. The dogs went upstairs with her to the bed. She said she had her phone with her and she called her husband Brian, but can't remember what was said. This is interesting because previously Sarah Boone said the morning that George's body was found, the phone was already downstairs. But now she says it was upstairs with her. So unless she says she brought it downstairs at some point, that's not matching the story she told. Owens asked her to tell the jury what he was saying. Sarah's asked if she's allowed to curse. She said he was saying he was going to fucking end me. That's what led her to ask him to stop doing what he was doing, and that he'd probably, she guesses, try his best to take her life that night. The threat was he was going to end me. Sarah acting all coy about swearing. Owen asked to approach the bench. The jury is let out of the deliberation room. We all knew this was coming. We have a new story, so now we need to know if this counts as an overt act, this new story. To me, the new story, as she tells it, has her committing crimes first. She is the one, by her own admission, that has him upside down. She says that the first video was before threats, and he was begging to get out. State comes up. This is close to what we know from the depositions with the doctors. Her timeline is she comes downstairs. Before she gets to the bottom of the stairs, she sees the victim in the suitcase. He isn't hidden yet. She moves it around before zipping the lid shut. It's fun and games. After zipping, all fun and games. She testifies it's her opportunity to get on her pulpit and express her true feelings and starts recording the video we saw. Sorry if that was loud. During this time, the decedent is expressing meekly he can't breathe. The only cursing is, Sarah, I can't fucking breathe. Babe, I can't fucking breathe. He is demonstrating under the law he fears for his life. She has committed an aggravated assault. She has committed imprisonment. She is the initial aggressor. There isn't an overt act to justify this. After the first video, Sarah says now at this time, he is still constrained. He can't get out under his own power. She's beating him with the bat, poking him in the hand in the suitcase with a deadly weapon. According to the medical examiner, there was great harm caused to him. She can't start to do that without fear. If I pull a gun on you, judge, and you pull one back on me in response, I can't shoot you in self-defense. State is asking for under the case law to prevent any instances of violence, any reputation, any battered spouse, and said that's just what the case ended up being. So now we have Owens. Owens is going to make his argument. And I don't know if it worked yet at the time of the recording, that he judges out when I record this. Owens said this was a game two intoxicated people did. Intoxicated people do silly and stupid things. George Torres, by his own choice, decided to hide in the suitcase. By laughing, he consented to being zipped up. And the minutes prior to the video, when the video turned on, he was saying, I can't breathe, and she isn't taking him seriously. She thought it was the boy crying wolf. This is a chance for her to be heard by him. As the video turned off, Sarah testified to that. There's a second period of time, no video, no witness, just Sarah Boone's testimony. There were words, threats, his hand. She knew he was going to hurt her. A reasonable person under that scenario would believe she was about to be harmed. She blocked the attack by hitting his hand with her bat and then poking him with the bat. He put his hand inside. She put the bat up. She saw he wasn't going to do that, flipped him over, still had a fear. She went upstairs. That is an overt act coupled with the fact he would end her. Just because she went upstairs just before she went upstairs with the suitcase, now it is a failure to act, failure to unzip, which would have created a situation she believes would cause harm to herself. My mind goes to, why not call the police once he was contained? When you saw he couldn't get out, why didn't you leave the home? But again, I agree with the state. I agree that Sarah Boone caused this. He was afraid for his life, and because of his fear for his life, Sarah Boone killed him and is using that to argue self-defense. Using her new statement. her best thing she could come up with after 4.5 years. That is my belief. Owen says he wants to give examples. These are a riot. Let's say a police officer was called to the scene and told a suspect may be armed. He finds the suspect and he reaches for his waist. The officer doesn't see the gun, sees the movement to the waist, fires, shoots the suspect. The officer is justified. No time to think, similar to the action Sarah Boone took. So if an officer got I'm assuming a false call about someone with a gun and killed someone who didn't have a gun because they reached for their waistband, that is comparable somehow to Sarah Boone watching a man beg to be able to breathe, and then when he tries to be able to breathe, beating him with a bat. Another example. You're in a bar with your buddies, one of your buddies gets into an argument, another friend sees it escalating, another guy is more aggressive, you come up behind the other person and grab him before he grabs your buddy. That is physical restraint to block his attack, or you choke him. That's what she was doing with the Suitcase. Well, isn't there a case is it New York? I haven't kept up with it, where a guy got charged for choking and killing a man who was being aggressive, because you can't just preemptively do that. Am I wrong on that? Is it the Perry case? It's been a while since I've looked into it. She let him out. She would be harmed. Court is reviewing case law and will return with oral ruling. So again, I don't know what the ruling is. I'm going in fresh. We'll continue in the next segment. There's still more. So we come back in, and a surprise, I think, to most people was that the court finds an overt act has been established, because it only takes a scintilla of an overt act. That is enough to provide self-defense instruction. The court is finding under Holland that an overt act has been found, and the defense can use past acts. The defense says maybe deal with the exhibits they're going to show ahead of time. Judge asks for any objection. State says they objected to things like a rap sheet before. State says that was taken out. State seemed a little worried, so they're just going to go up and go through everything, and they settled. Everything's fine. And now Sarah Boone goes to the witness stand. And I'll say to me, personally, it's crazy that Sarah is allowed to be the tone police, and that is how we're deciding an overt act. His tone was happy. His tone was actually crying wolf when he was begging for help. But then his tone when off video was threatening, so self-defense is justified. Then his tone after was calm enough that she flipped him over and it was safe to go to bed. Am I the only one that's like, okay, I've let her use that as the defense? I don't think it is one. I don't think it's found to be valid by the jury. I think it's just dragging it out, and it's just kind of insulting, to be honest. But let's continue. Sarah says after talking to Brian Boone that night, she fell asleep. So again, she didn't correct to her old stories about the phone being downstairs the next morning. So I don't know if the state will bring that up. I noticed it. Sarah said she didn't intentionally sleep in. Sarah said she heard the phone ringing, didn't answer. Said maybe 3 times, expected it to be Brian Boone to make sure she would pick up her son. She stayed in bed for a while because she knew it was her ex-husband, and he doesn't understand. There are things going on around the apartment. They're looking for jobs. I guess, or also, murders downstairs, and she just is laying in bed and doesn't feel like getting up. Maybe he doesn't understand that. It's just weird to me. She's like trying to paint him as the bad guy for trying to make sure she's going to be responsible. And she admitted previously there was a history of her not, being able to take care of him. So she let it ring and she laid in bed. Eventually motivated to go downstairs, she said she thought George had left. Owens asked where she looked. She said the couch, backstairs, out the front door. And then after being near the bathroom, she noticed the suitcase. She remembered the night prior and unzipped it. Owens stopped her. Asked, did she experience anything like that? What'd she experience, right? She said she hasn't experienced anything like that when discovering the suitcase. Terror to a degree. She unzipped the suitcase, screaming, George, George. Stressed him out flat, tried CPR, trying to get him to respond. He started to gurgle and was purple. After he gurgled, she called her ex-husband, who is known for bringing her son over at inopportune times, like when George is drunk or doing inappropriate things. Yes, she really said that. I don't know why she's adding that. Brian was her go-to person, though, so she called him. She told him to come over. She thought George was dead. 5 minutes house to house. She said she called him back because he was taking so long. If you listen to Brian Boone's explanation, He told her to call 911. He had to get up, put the puppy away that was like running about, had to get clothes on. He was working from home. He wasn't able to go out. Took about 10 minutes, and when she called again, he told her to call 911. He got there, walked in, walked out, said call 911. She doesn't mention that Brian was telling her call 911 every time that she was on the phone with him. Sarah says she loved George, loves him to this day. He was passionate. He was nice on a good day. He complimented her. She didn't have a connection with her ex-husband like she had with George. Another slight towards Brian Boone. They both drank too much. If George was able to, he would drink from sunup to sundown. George was upset with her taking care of her son and was angry they could only afford wine. He would sometimes go and buy handles of vodka and drink it sometimes on his own. She thought he might be doing that in the morning. They both had an alcohol problem. George's drinking debilitated Sarah's ability to help George because it was a day of survival, or it was a day of her peeling him off of her and calling 911. Owen asked about his pattern. There was an objection. Objection overruled for now. They were together for 3.5 years. He would get drunk and get violent against her. Sarah is shown photos of her body. She doesn't remember the date because it was so often. She doesn't remember what caused the injury. There was an objection sustained for when Sarah started telling a story. She said she doesn't remember if they had been drinking. They show the injuries. It's bruises under her arm and a bruise on her rib cage. Another photo shown to Sarah, it was her thigh. Sarah remembers this story. They had been drinking. She wanted to walk her dog. He wanted her to drink. Said George slapped her thigh as hard as he could, then shows the photo. Quick on cam, very quick. I went back and paused it. So I was like, that was real quick. To me, maybe I'm blind. I couldn't tell anything. Maybe some redness, maybe. I took probably 2 or 3 minutes. I went back and I'm watching this live. I took a moment. I really tried to find. I'm going to mention it throughout. I really do try to take a find and look at the injuries, because I'm going to explain them instead of showing them. She said George was drunk. Took her keys. He put them around his neck. She tried to take the keys. He took a butcher knife. She called Brian, who came with her son. So in this situation, George is a butcher knife, and she calls Brian, who shows up with her son. Her son was yelling to give mommy her keys. Brian told him to give her the keys. They struggled for the keys, and she injured her hand, lost a fingernail, and there's a photo showing a bruised and bloody hand. Sarah shows a new photo, said she was heating up soup, and George slapped it out of her hand, causing second-degree burn. Hard for me to see. It kind of looks like a burn on her thigh, so I'm just going to say it's a burn on her thigh. Sarah was shown a photo, and Owen says this will be a long story. Sarah says George stabbed her and she almost bled to death, and then Owens makes her go back, because that's not enough, right? You need to know what happened here. Sarah said she made a potato and steak dinner, which is rare. They were both drinking. George was on the back porch. Sarah had a movie ready in the bedroom. Said he was drunk. So he was so drunk it wasn't George. They were going to eat it in bed. George was being rude and cursing the steak. She says George started pulling on her and said, "I just want to fuck you on the steak, and fuck you on the potatoes." Sarah says she took offense. Sarah says she doesn't know why he was so angry. She said she started to leave the bed, and he told her she wasn't going anywhere, and he stabbed her, and it crunched. She held a wet towel on it. It saturated real quick. He's bleeding. George begged her to not call the police. She took her keys, he put the keys around his neck and took her phone. She went downstairs. Sarah's telling him it's serious. She went upstairs to her son's bathroom, said her lips were blue. Sarah said she was going to die but needed help. George made her concoct a story for how she actually got hurt. The story was they were sword fighting with the steak knives and she accidentally got stabbed. He wanted her to drive, but he drove because she couldn't do it. On the drive, he was telling her to follow the story. Sheriffs got called in. She kept to the story. She ended up having to go to 2 hospitals. The photos show her in bed, a sewed-up stab wound, and a scar was physically shown that she currently has on her to the jury. Next photo. Injury to lip and face. They had been drinking. She said many times she wanted to sleep and he would want to drink more. He grabbed her by her hair, scratched her face, scraped her face against the carpet because he wanted her to drink. Photo from the first time she called 911 is up next. Now, I believe this is in 2018, and it might not be, they didn't give a date, and that's kind of annoying me. The story here, I think the state might introduce the body cam that I previously covered on the channel. It's the body cam where Sarah Boone got arrested, and according to the arrest affidavit, it was for, she ended up getting charged with third-degree felony strangulation. I have to assume it was this one because there's a story now that is different than that night, but it keeps a lot of the same elements. I'll try to remember as I go to compare. George was on the back porch. She asked a guy for a cigarette, and George took her phone and went home. So that was in Sarah's story. I should probably actually start with George's version since we're going to go through Sarah's story. George's version was they were upset about something. I can't remember what. I don't know if he said. They were going up. He was going up the steps to get away from her. Sarah went up behind him, started choking him, and he was shoving her off of him, and she's trying to like crawl on top of him, and he might have accidentally kicked her in the eye. That was George's story. Now Sarah's story now is after he left the bar with her phone because she wanted a cigarette from a guy. In her previous story, she said that he was mad she wanted a cigarette from a guy. He was on the back porch drinking vodka. She said he left with her car. In the video I watched, the body cam, Sarah says her car was still across the street. I thought at the bar. She said that George called her a whore, slut, cunt. He pushed her into the metal door and hit her head against the metal door. Now, Sarah Boone's story previously, and I'm trying to go off of memory, was something along the lines of she got home and she doesn't know how she got upstairs. She doesn't know how she ended up on the ground. And at some point, George kicked her in the eye. And when asked later about the marks on his neck, she said that was in self-defense. So I think that it wasn't a lot of details. She didn't want to give a lot of details to the cop. They both got arrested that night. George got a misdemeanor. She got charged with the third-degree felony strangulation. So that he pushed her into a metal door, hit her head against the metal door. She was afraid. She would bite her tongue. He strangled her. And again, with all of these claims, you can check out the body cam and see do you think she's concussed at the time, anything like that. You can see how she's acting. She says she grabbed his throat and pushed him off. He stomped on her face. He passed out, so she called 911. Police arrived. There's a photo of Sarah shown with a black eye. She says it's from a couple of days later, so that would not match. She won't look like that in the body cam from that night. Chat from the live stream is at this time was spamming its makeup. Doesn't look real. I don't know about that. I mean, it does look like a black eye with no swelling a few days later. So I mean, I see why they're thinking that. I don't think that. I think it's a photo of an actual black eye. I do wonder if the date is verified. I would have to assume it is, right? And I believe her face was, she said her face was swollen. But again, he admitted he kicked her in the face. The difference is her story was she doesn't know how. He kicked her in the face, and then she grabbed him by the neck in self-defense. His story was he was trying to get away from her. She grabbed him by the neck, and she's shoving him. She shoves her off. She keeps trying to climb on top, and he ended up maybe accidentally kicking her, just trying to keep her away, on the steps. So it's a he said, she said at that point. Probably gonna have different opinions on that one, because I mean, we know George isn't perfect, right? To say the least. But that night does have two versions, and people are gonna pick one, and they're gonna stand by it wholehearted. I guarantee it. Another photo this time of her leg. This incident, she was trying to get off the back porch, and she says that George pushed her to the ground, and her knee hit a rock or a sharp piece of mulch at the right angle. They had been drinking, and he wanted her to stay drinking with him. I think she wanted to go walk her dog. This one, I think I forgot to write that down. She says he wants to be with her, maybe due to insecurity. Says she did her best to please him and then some. Says she used a first aiding kit on it herself. Looks like, and they show the photo. It looks like a bleeding scrape to me. Like if I pull up my phone right now, my phone has photos of me with like a bleeding scrape, a burn, a bunch of things like that. Because I'll just document if I get hurt, make sure, just in case it doesn't heal up right or whatever, I'll do that. Maybe that's a me thing. So, to me, it didn't look like proof of this incident, if that makes sense. It looks like a photo I might have taken of me like falling and bleeding, or someone's like, or like maybe I'm home alone and I'm messaging someone and I'm like, yeah, I scraped my knee, and they're like, oh, is it bad? And I'm like, not really. Well, show it to me just in case, I'll get a second opinion. And I take a photo, something like that, not saying it didn't happen, but it didn't. It's not like one of those. It's not like the stab wound to her leg where there's like, obviously it wasn't an accidental fall when you get stabbed in the leg with a knife, right? I didn't skip over that, did I? No, I didn't. The story about her, yeah. The story about them, like the story being that she says George came up with where they were play sword fighting with the knives. Let me make sure I continue here. I'm just trying not to miss anything because they are going to come back. This isn't even the last part. I'm just trying to do it as I go so I can like have my opinions as I go. Okay, so the next to the photo of her arm, Sarah is asked if she remembers this incident, and she says multiple times. And Owen says, no, this particular time, this isolated incident, the photo was taken, and then she says yes. To me, that's a little weird because I don't know now. Now I'm questioning whether she actually knows or she's just saying she does, right? And she's gonna insert one of those many times. That's just a me thing. She said she was injured by George Torres. She tried to pull away from him. Him pulling her arm started to leave splotches, and she doesn't know why her arm does that. And they put it up, and to me, it looks like a rash or a little bit of discoloration. It doesn't look like an injury to me. Like like Owens even says it doesn't look like a wound, and starts saying that, and got objection sustained. Like it's not a good photo to show. Owens tries to have Sarah explain how she gets it from the pressure of him pulling on her arms. It just didn't really play well, I don't think. It doesn't look like a real injury to me. It doesn't. It looks like a rash. It looks like, you scraped your arm, maybe. Like it's like not even like a scrape. It's like looks like maybe some pimples. I don't know. Eczema. I don't know. Next is a photo of her ear. Sarah says she wasn't drinking during this time. And Owens goes, oh, so this is an incident where you hadn't consumed any alcohol. And Sarah goes, well, maybe earlier. She was just trying to sleep. George was downstairs drinking. Sarah said she used to barricade the door. She barricaded the door with a dresser. All the locks in the home were broken by George. George told her that she is to be with him at all times. She doesn't want to part from him. He would follow her even to the bathroom. She wanted time away from him, said she rarely got to sleep. She barricaded the door with a 200-pound dresser and a nightstand. And she doesn't know how, but George would get in through a crack. Now, I don't know his weight during this incident, but remember, he died at the weight of 103. So he's 103, opening a door barricaded with a 200-pound dresser and a nightstand. Gets in, and then this happens. She says he pulled her out of bed, said she was going to die, and punched her in the side of the head and temple. Closed fist. Photo is bright and hard to see. I think there's bruising on her ear, and it looks like it's maybe it looks a little purplish. I'm not saying it doesn't show an injury. I'm just saying it's not very clear from the camera. Maybe it's better in the court. A lot of this time, you'll notice Owens is trying to like direct to look at a certain part, because I just think the display in the court's bad. The lights are on and they're using a projector. I think that says enough for anyone who's done that. Police were called to that one. The next up is Sarah's face. She says the photo was on February 23rd, 2020. Which would be, is that the day before? Or the day of? Anyway, because she was sleeping, George got a metal curtain rod and snapped it in half and crunched it in her forehead, and then beat it with furniture. And I thought, oh, she's saying this was right then and there. This was like a month later, she said. It sounds like this photo might have been taken by crime scene people. She said she wanted stitches, but wasn't allowed to go to the hospital. It was a gash. Same curtain rod mentioned in the interrogation that they never took. She said it is healed. Honestly, to me, it kind of looked like a pimple, like a bad pimple where you pop it and there's a little blood and you go a little hard. I mean, again, it could be the angle. She doesn't have a photo of the big gash, right? We're getting a little mark on the forehead, which is interesting because she has photos of basically every other incident and then doesn't have a photo of this one. But then again, she could always say George has access to the phone. Maybe he'd delete the photos. But then why didn't he delete the other photos? I just have questions about some of this. Again, not saying it didn't happen, just saying she's not providing the best evidence to prove it did, if that makes sense. There's another photo of a bruise on her hand from holding the baseball bat. Again, I can't really see anything on the feed. Owens is trying to direct the jury to see it, a little purplish maybe in her palm. Owens asked if that was sustained from hitting him with the bat. Objection, bleeding, sustained. Owen asked, do you know how you suffer that injury? So he said she believed from the baseball bat, trying to get his hand back in. Sarah is then given a stack of 5 photos. I don't know why they're bringing up the injury to her hand. Like, are we supposed to feel bad? I don't get that one. This one was interesting. So Sarah was given a stack of 5 photos, and she says it's an accurate depiction. They are stills from a video on her phone. Immediately, my thought is, why aren't we watching the video then? I mean, we watched plenty of videos in this case. Why aren't we watching this video? And then she could talk about it. No, because they were allowed to watch videos for the other witnesses, right? So why can't we watch the video? She says a video from her phone with George Torres and her phone. She said her son liked to use the TV. Sarah had to call Brian over to fix the Fire Stick. George got mad Brian was over. He accused Sarah of sucking Brian's dick, and he would make her unrecognizable for her son. He took the bat, told her to record it. He broke the TV. George pointed the bat at her. George hit the TV, passed out with the bat. I'm not sure why any of this supports the. I don't know why we're watching this without a video. Like, why aren't we watching the video with the audio if this supports the story she's giving? It's just weird to me. I mean, not saying it doesn't. It's just weird they wouldn't use a video, especially if George is supposed to be this like evil, mean person. Wouldn't you want it on video? The photos are very, very staged looking, if that makes sense. Like, he said he wanted it recorded, right? That makes sense. Like, how do I want to put it? I could see this style of photo for someone drunk or just wanting to have fun. The TV's broken and they're like, screw it, I might as well beat it because it'd be funny. I mean, people do things destroying TVs all the time. Again, I really need that audio. A photo from the living room. There's a baby gate at the bottom of the stairs for the dog. We've talked about that baby gate, by the way. Owen says there's an allegation you pushed George down the stairs or got him in the suitcase. Did it happen? She says absolutely not. She says the bookshelf and the plant at the bottom aren't disturbed. Next photo is Sarah with her dogs drinking. George took the photo. She discusses the dogs and facts about them. Sarah says all the time he would threaten the dogs. She said one of the worst threats was to leave the gate open. Not a threat that he would do it. He would actually open it. And then say that she should come home and find her blind dog's bloated body in the pond across from the townhome. She would have to scrape up the body in the street in front of the apartment complex. Anything to get a hold on Sarah. She said the dogs were afraid of him. Owens asked why he would kick the dogs. Objection sustained. And then the photo is just a photo of Sarah smiling with the dog. Which I don't think, like, I don't know. Maybe it's like the same reason you would want to show pictures of a kid to like get people's emotions in it. There's no photos that were presented, at least so far, showing him abusing the animals. just claims. Sarah started talking about how she used to call her son her bunny rabbit. Objection overruled. That's why she collects bunny rabbits. She pointed out the alcohol cups in the photo. There's another photo of the deaf dog. Dogs are maybe 9, 10. Owens asked to approach. Jury is asked if they would like to take a break. No hands. Judge asked for any concerns with working until 6. Juror that previously had childcare issues, no issue. Then a juror's like, well, if we're here till 6, I would like a break. So they took a break. And I recorded this video. And there's going to be more. So I gotta get back to watching, get notes, and it's all getting combined today. We'll see how this format does. We'll see if you like it. My opinion as we go. We are back, and I have to be honest, my hands are killing me from taking notes. My throat hurts. I'm gonna do what I can. If you like the content, like, comment, subscribe. If you want to support the channel, check the pinned comment for ways you can do that. Let's talk. The sheriff says something right off the bat, and the judge asks for parties to approach. I don't know why they did this approach, but I thought I would mention it. That was kind of notable to me. I thought maybe a juror had done something. Apparently not. Sarah is verifying some blown up photos from earlier. They are much easier to see. Like they're the big blown up ones. If you've watched any of the trial and the previous arguments where he wanted to use them in the opening and on his closing, they're huge. There's definitely an injury to her ear. I mentioned I believe that I couldn't really tell. It looked a little purple. The one on her face to me still kind of looks like a pimple or just a scratch. It doesn't look that bad. Like not a gash, right? But she does say it's like a month old. George called his brother the night of the death. Owen said, you made a statement about tell him something, explain that to the jury. So this portion of Sarah talking to her lawyer, to me, was trying to, how do I want to put this? It feels like they were trying to fix all of the holes people had been talking about and thought about, like me, right? I'm doing these as I go, so I believe I talked about a lot of these holes. Sarah said she told him tell the brother about him choking her the other day. They had been drinking. George didn't say it, so she was saying it in the background. Sarah heard the testimony from the neighbors that they heard a thumping sound at the top of her stairs going to the bottom. Sarah says they got the night wrong. It was actually the night before they said it happened. Sarah was sleeping with the door barricaded, and George ripped her out of the bed. One hand and then both, and then like a caveman, dragged her down by her hair down the stairwell so she could sit and drink with him. And she thinks that was the noise that Owens called the two neighbor boys heard. These are adult men, so sometimes with abuse she called the police, other times she didn't. And they talk about the first 911 call. I mentioned, I believe, in the previous video that I thought it was the one that I called. Where did I call it? I want to make sure it's there so you can go check it. It's in my Sarah Boone playlist. I watched the whole video. I called it the Haunting Sarah Boone Arrest Body Cam. My picture might have blacked out for a second behind me. That's fine. So that video, that is actually the one they're talking about. That was the incident that George had kicked Sarah in the eye. Sarah corrected, stomped. She said, and she's trying to explain the situation because, again, there's a lot of questions, right? She said that she grabbed his neck while he pinned her down with his knees. Both of them were arrested. Sarah asked the officer why she's being arrested as they arrested her. Sarah is asked if she recalls asking any other statements. She said it was the first time she ever officially fought back. She told the officer she fought back. It was a complete shock. She was arrested for fighting back. On the Suitcase video, Sarah said, this is what it's like when you choke me, but that wasn't an isolated incident. It was 4 or 5 times. And George didn't physically cheat on her. According to Sarah, George was addicted to porn. And she found it. She viewed just watching porn as cheating, which is a whole new level. Like, I've seen people wonder if he was like, hitting up women or whatever. He was watching porn. That's less than I feel most people thought it was. I wouldn't have even mentioned it, right? Unless the state's going to. Maybe that's why they were afraid the state was going to. Owens asked why she stayed with him. She says, when you love someone, you go above and beyond, tolerate, persevere. You serve someone else in a positive light. Love isn't fully understood, and she loves George to this day. She liked George. She liked having George around after her divorce. He compliments her. The compliments made her day. She had a low self-esteem. She's asked, she went to the police station on the day of the interrogation. She said the detective gave her the phone number to call if something came up. Sarah said she didn't feel comfortable with what the detective told her. She was at the scene all day, got stuff inside, and went to Brian Boone's home. She didn't even feed her dogs, which I will say the chat was like, oh, so animal abuse. Great, let's add that to the pile, right? I don't know why that was. I wouldn't have said that if I was her. She said she didn't feel the detective was being honest. Objections, speculation, sustained. Sarah said she called the detective and told her she was being dishonest. That she said the detective said she was pregnant and it'd be easier to come down and pick up her phone. She said she told her she doesn't think she was being honest with her, but regardless, I will come. Objection, sustained. Sarah said she went there to get her phone. She thought she would sign something and get her phone. They told her that her phone was upstairs. They took her into an interrogation room, and it began. There's an approach at this point. Owens asked, my eye's also hurting. Owens asked why she lied to the police. She said she lied because she was extremely careful to not get arrested. She said the first time she called 911, she was arrested for calling 911. Which, see, to me, this is a big problem, right? Because Sarah called 911 multiple times, and was she lying those other times to not get arrested? I'm going to give you a little spoiler here. The state is going to have questions about her threatening to call 911 to get George arrested, to have him do things she wants. Is it fair to say George Torres is when George Torres is sober, he commits no violence against you? Every time Sarah is harmed by him, he's drinking. Sarah is fearful because of the prior instances. Sarah tries to placate him with like feeding ducks and painting. She was running out of things to do. Owen says, what bothers George? And there's an objection, hearsay, sustained. Does he tell you? Objection, speculation, sustained. Due to how he acts while intoxicated, in an intoxicated state, how do you feel the night of the event? Objection, overruled. Sarah says anxiety, can't relax while he's drinking. The state of him drinking scares her. The tone, lots of alarms and red flags. Objection, sustained. It heightens her sense of safety. Depending on how he is drinking, Owens asks if she has like a sixth sense of how George is doing, and Sarah says yes. This is a tone policing trial at its core. I think I said this in a previous video. We have to believe, under Sarah's argument, that she could know George's future actions just by a tone shift in his voice. Owens asked, what do you mean by sixth sense, or knew him very well? She said she was trained by fear. It wasn't fun drinking and hanging out because something was going to happen to her one way or another. Owens says George's bruises are deep. What were you thinking? She didn't want to die that night. Terrifying love. She wanted him to be what she thought what he was when they first met. She was tired of living in fear. She was tired of thinking how to placate him. She wanted a normal life with her son. Bottom line is she didn't want to die. She would be maimed or disfigured. If it wasn't him, it would have been me. And that's where the defense leaves it. Cross-examination time. First question. Did George know somebody named Crystal? Sarah says, I don't know. Did you ever mention Crystal in your texts about being one of his bitches? Sarah says she doesn't know. She doesn't remember. They ask if George knew a Christine. Sarah says, I don't know. How about a Pamela Erickson? Sarah said maybe some people he was talking to on her phone because she saw a few messages. That's starting to change her story, right? Did you send a long letter to his family about George and the girls he was cheating on you with? Sarah believes so. She said she doesn't remember. It's been so long. February 24th, 2020, you called 911 at about 1 p.m. Yes. You were still feeling intoxicated. It was more shock, but yes. So you agree with your previous statement that you were still intoxicated to a degree? Yes. So that 1 p.m. is about 14 hours after 12 p.m., right? I guess so. And he says, and he kind of like goes to the time, math. You heard a medical examiner and her discussing the effects of alcohol, correct? Yes. Do you remember her saying something about dissipate so much an hour? I believe so. So is it fair to say you were feeling the effects of alcohol at 1 p.m.? Did you feel you were 2 times the legal limit at that time? Sarah says, I don't know how you came to that number. Approach. My guess is they did the numbers backwards to figure out just how drunk Sarah Boone would have to be to still feel intoxicated 14 hours later. And it was a number that maybe didn't make sense. But they kind of changed the questions after this, so we don't get to know. They bring out the wine bottles, and they talk about her testimony about how much they drank. They had half left over from the night before, and he's holding one of the bottles, and she says, he asks, is this one of the bottles? She says, I guess it looks like it. He asks Sarah, is it 1.5 liters? You agree? Shows her the number. She says yes. When you say half, do you mean the top of the label? No, she means halfway down the label. So there's less there than, if it was the top. They're trying to get her there. I get that. After finishing what was left over from Saturday, the two of you consumed 2 1.5 liter bottles, correct? Sarah says she isn't sure about the second bottle he purchased, but prosecution points out that she told them they would find 2 empty bottles in the trash, and we all saw that on the video, and we saw that they found it, and they found the receipts. We all know that. Sarah says she was about 100 pounds at the time, and George Torres was about 103. Again, this kind of, when we're talking about weight, Sarah, in the arrest affidavit, 2 days later, was listed as 140. Whether they took that from her ID or they weighed her, I don't know. That is 3 liters of wine between 200 pounds of people, according to the prosecution, and she was intoxicated at the time of the recorded event. And what does that mean to you? She previously, what does it mean to be intoxicated? And he said, you previously said it was like the room is spinning. She says, I remember. What was the level of intoxication at the time of recording? Were you feeling tired? How were you feeling? Were you trouble with balance? She says, I don't believe so. Maybe tired. I believe she said tired. I didn't write that, but I believe she said tired. But she definitely says, I don't believe so. She didn't have trouble with balance. You could flip a suitcase with a 100-pound man inside, and she said, yes, it happened. Yes, her speech was slurred. Sarah was asked if, looking back, would you have done all of that if you weren't drinking? She says she couldn't say. If she was scared at something, she might. They mentioned she would talked about 11 minutes between today. So, what is that about? I think it's supposed to be they talked about the 11 minutes between the videos. There's going to be more information about that soon. You come down from the shower, you see a lid is closed, and he's trying to hide, and you immediately zip it shut. She is asked how long after zipping it up was the first video recorded. She says she doesn't know without watching it. And he says, well, the video, you wouldn't see him being zipped up because you were like 10 feet away. Sarah says she doesn't know how soon. They're trying to catch her in something. They asked Sarah if she is saying he got angry between the 2 videos. Correct. The state has to correct how long it was between the 2 videos because the state said something. The defense said something different. The defense was using the start time of the video, not the end. It was actually less than 10 minutes. They showed on screen. The first video was at 2/23/2020 at 11:12:24 p.m. That's when it started capturing a video that's about 2 minutes and 3 seconds long. The second video is 2/23/2020 at 11:23:04. And I want to say that I've never measured between these two. I just assumed they were measuring right because, I didn't think about it. But the phone only lists when it started recording, not when it ended. So there was less time in between than people thought. Between the two movies, George Torres began to become angry. You could tell a tone shift in what Sarah says he said, and Sarah says he was angry all day. State points out, you didn't tell us earlier. You said it was a wonderful, fun day. Sarah said because it was. The state says you didn't tell us earlier that he had been angry throughout the entire day, correct? She asked, when did I say that? I think you're getting the tone of the day here. And the state says you described your whole day and it was wonderful and fun until he was in the suitcase. They get Sarah to confirm he got angry again during the time between videos. How did he express his anger? Sarah says they asked Sarah at what point in the day. The state says, ma'am, you know very well I am talking about between these movies. Please answer my question. He told me I was going to fucking die, which I don't think is the term that she just testified to, but okay. After this, he had repeatedly told you he can't breathe, correct? Correct. He had been in there since however long it took you to zip him up, laughter to stop, and you to begin filming, correct? Yes. Your purpose of the filming was to teach him a lesson to say things to him when he can't do anything back, correct? No. Then correct me. There was no lesson to be learned, just wanted him to learn how I felt. So you wanted him to learn how you felt, and that isn't teaching him a lesson? She says, I just wanted him to understand. After, immediately prior to zipping him up, you were upstairs in the shower, correct? Yes. One second, I got a cough. So Sarah Boone is repeating the same part of her story. She was upstairs, she came downstairs, she saw him, and zipped him up. This image that they show then was captured on the timeline at 11:03 p.m. and 11 seconds on her device. That is 9 minutes before the first video. It's a photo of the suitcase. It's zipped up. So she took another photo of George. It looks like maybe, right? Maybe. What they're getting at. Sarah says she doesn't remember if she took it or not. They get Sarah to admit they drank 1.5 liters of wine and whatever was left over from the day before. Sarah doesn't remember taking the photo. She was asked if Mr. Torres was inside. She says she doesn't remember taking the photo. Sarah's asked, what is her memory between 11:03 p.m. when the photo was taken and 11:12 p.m. when the video started? She doesn't remember. Isn't this the most convenient thing you've ever heard? Sarah Boone only remembers the part that is on video that she can't deny, the part between videos that she makes claims to defend herself, and then the next part that's on video she can't deny. That is a selective memory, I would say, or at least a selective of that night. Very, very particular. She says she remembers things from that night. The state mentions she told police she didn't remember taking the video, and she admits she told them that. Now she says she remembers taking it. She does. But now she says she doesn't remember the photo 9 minutes prior to the video she now says she remembers taking. Correct. Did you have more to drink in those 9 minutes? I did not. Now here's the thing, right? How do you know? If you don't know what happened in those 9 minutes, how do you know you didn't drink in those 9 minutes? It's really interesting when Sarah says no in the time frame she doesn't know. Sarah is asked if Mr. Torres was in the suitcase the entire time from 11:03 with the photo until the last second of the second video at 11:23. Sarah says she believes so. And they said, so that's for 20 minutes. It's almost 20 minutes exact there. Whatever the time frame is. Does she remember him saying he can't breathe before the video? She doesn't remember. Sarah testified her neighbors must have misremembered the night before. You remember that, right? She said it was the day before. Now you're telling us you don't remember 11:03 p.m. that night. Correct. Now what's interesting is the neighbors said it was about 11 that they heard the loud sound going down the steps. Right around the time Sarah doesn't remember, right around the time she decides to take a photo of George Torres in a suitcase. But there's more. Did the police go to your residence on the 23rd? Correct. State says this was the fun day, Sunday, the day before. Were the police at your residence? No. So they got Sarah, right? She doesn't know the dates. She just messed up the dates. She's done that a couple times with different points. It was the day after, Monday the 24th, that they came, right? Yes. That Monday afternoon, she called 911, and she was the only one in the apartment, and the only she was the only one in the apartment other than Mr. Torres. Correct. So if anything had been disturbed, you had all that time to undisturb them before calling 911. Correct. If I wanted to. So remember, there was an argument by the defense that she couldn't have knocked him down the steps because there were things at the bottom of the steps. She had all the time in the world to come down, move that planter, move that gate, theoretically knock him down the steps, and then put it all back. She had about 14 hours, in fact, part of which she can't remember, but also remembers the neighbors must be wrong. Let's continue here. Your testimony is still there was no loud boom that shook the walls of your townhouse at 11 p.m. on the night on February 23rd. Correct? Correct. To the best of your memory. Correct? Correct. And her memory is not sounding too good. I was a juror. The second video, where he just says, Sarah, how long after did you go upstairs? Pretty quick. Did you grab the dogs? Dogs were already upstairs. Okay. Did you call 911 and say you zipped a man in a suitcase and you've been there for 20 minutes? I did not. Did you call Brian? Did you go to Brian's house and say I zipped Mr. Torres up in a suitcase? We need to do something about this before he passes. She says, I believe that is what the phone call was. Excuse me, Sarah Boone? Sarah Boone, you are now trying to implicate your ex-husband, the father of your child, in knowing that you were actively murdering a man? We continue. The state asks what she remembers to her phone call with Brian, and she says she doesn't remember what it was about. So she's trying to implicate Brian Boone, her ex-husband, suddenly. Sounds like a vindictive ex trying to take everyone down around her after she knows she's screwed. And even then, I don't remember what we talked about. So she doesn't remember. She just assumes that she might have implicated him. How does a jury... I don't get it. I don't get it. How does a jury not just, like, this is bad. Like, you don't believe her at this point, right? They might have got some sympathy with those photos or anything like this, but it's followed up with this. And I am really curious how the chat will be. I'm probably going to make this one live. I'm really curious if there's anyone in the chat like, oh, I had some sympathy after the photos. I wonder where that sympathy went and if it changed. Because I'll be honest, I had a little sympathy going into the photos. More than before. We got to see it, more clear. I mean, I still believe she's guilty. I still believe that she shouldn't have done it, but that kind of went away real fast here. Because it sounds like, she likes to lie. She likes to implicate. And do I know that these injuries that she is showing, are they all actually from George? I'm not saying they never are, but are they all from him, or is she using them to tell a tale now? Did she get them to purposely tell a tale to 911 in the future? And we'll get to where maybe that was the case. You spent day after day trying to find things to entertain Mr. Torres, correct? Correct. What you described sounds like taking care of a small child. That is your interpretation. Well, arts and crafts, doing puzzles, correct? Correct. When he has been drinking, she would do that. Do you remember your testimony calling people notorious for things? Yes. What would people say you are notorious for? I don't know. Interesting how she doesn't have that introspective at all. You wouldn't answer Brian Boone's phone calls to let him know you are busy and have things going on? She said, I knew he could wait a few moments for me getting up. Lucas gets off school at 3 p.m. But you return his call after he called multiple times, correct? That day. He wasn't reminding her to make sure he wasn't reminding her, he was just making sure he was covered for drop off. So Sarah doesn't like the portrayal that she is not reliable. She's trying to be the good mother, right? She just wants to be a good mother. She just wants to be a mother to her son. That was the ending of the statement by the defense there, right? You didn't mention you and Mr. Torres going to Publix that day, correct? I don't recall. Best evidence would be the interview recording, correct? Correct. Did you not remember going to Publix with Mr. Torres that day? At what time? At any time. No, I didn't. So Sarah, if I'm understanding what she's saying here, is saying she didn't know she went with him until she saw the video. Again, so we have the day of the murder. She doesn't remember so much except when it's needed to exonerate her or when it's on video. And she knew about, and she also only remembers the parts that not only are on video, that she knows are on video. She didn't know about the Publix video. You indicated to the police you started drinking at 4 p.m., correct? Correct. Now you indicate you started drinking after Publix around 12:30, correct? Correct. Did you not tell the truth, the police the truth about it? Correct? Correct. When the police asked if you had anything to do with Mr. Torres' injuries, you told them you had nothing to do with it, correct? Correct. And that was not the truth, correct? Correct. What did you have for breakfast on the 23rd? I don't remember. What did you have for lunch? I believe we had leftovers. Do you recall what those were? Not at this time. You mentioned having a sandwich of some kind for dinner. No, I believe we ate at the same time. Whatever that means. I don't think she remembered her testimony about the sandwich. It was a pork loin and she had ham. I remember it. Why doesn't Sarah remember it? George called his brother Juan, correct? Yes. You were yelling in the background for Mr. Torres to tell his brother he had been choking you, correct? She said, I don't know if I was yelling, but he could hear me through the phone. When that day did you start getting on Mr. Torres for choking you? And she said, he and I have had conversations before. He doesn't remember doing it to me the next day. Something like that. Is it fair to say there are times and you don't remember what you do, correct? What are you talking about? Almost 5 years ago? I'm talking about from drinking. Is it fair to say you often don't remember things you do while drinking? She says, I wouldn't say often. I mean, I wouldn't either. I'd say she seems to not remember things when she's drinking by the way she words it whenever it's convenient. In the course of your relationship, are there things that happen between you and Mr. Torres that you don't remember? I can't say that at this point. Well, you don't remember a lot of that day, huh? And then they say you don't remember taking that photograph, correct? Correct. Was there anything else you told Mr. Torres he needed to tell his brother? Not that I recall. Anything to tell his daughter? Not that I recall. You indicated Mr. Torres would use your phone to look at pornography, correct? Yes. Was it ever you using your phone to look at pornography? If it was to go back and look to see, basically saying, I only look as he looked. Did you ever threaten to get Mr. Torres arrested if he didn't do what you asked him to do? I wouldn't say threaten. And this is where her keeping these photos and changing stories and admitting to lying. She's sounding vindictive, wouldn't you say? Like maybe she's she knows he's abusive, so she can say what she needs to say to control him. Were there ever times you would like him to call you or return a call and he didn't do that, so you would threaten to get him arrested if he had my keys or something I needed? So now she admits it. It was Sarah's townhouse, yes? Yes. When was he removed from the lease? She said he wasn't removed, but she thinks he was just made a tenant. Did you change the locks when you kicked him out so he couldn't get back in? Yes, sometimes. Did you leave the key in a hiding spot where he knew where to get it? There were multiple hiding places. Did you ever, on the 911 calls, mention that Mr. Torres knew where you hid the keys? She doesn't know why she would do that. He wouldn't break into her home. It is your testimony that you didn't push him down the stairs, and it was in fact him who dragged you down, correct? Correct. And dragged you, you mean your feet, yes? Did you get scrapes or anything from the carpet? I'm not sure. Did you get any injuries like bruises, abrasions, scrapes? I was missing a wad of my hair. It was on the stairwell. And you are aware you were photographed after the incident, right? Correct. You said you can't smoke inside, but there's ashtrays inside. She admits sometimes they did smoke inside. You admit you would go to the hospital and tell them things that weren't correct, correct? Correct. There's times you go to the hospital and leave without treatment, correct? Is it fair to say you would go to the hospital with alcohol in your system, correct? Sometimes. Sarah is doing everything she can but admit she's a drunk. She doesn't want to admit she's a drunk. She doesn't want to admit fault because you can't excuse that, right? Summarizing the day, you all wake up at an unknown time on February 23rd, correct? You didn't use the phone to wake up, so waking up might not be the first activity on the phone. Basically, she's not using the phone, and it might not be an activity log, other than looking at the time. No breakfast, do chores, go to Publix, get the 1.5 liter of wine. State asks if they started drinking the bottle of wine they bought. Sarah says, I guess. The state says, don't guess. Sarah said they could have been drinking the leftover bottle. She says she doesn't know when they began drinking, but it was before the phone calls. They drank the bottle from before, drank the 1.5 liter. Then George Torres went out and got another 1.5 liter. You both drank it, and it ended up in the trash. Sarah says, apparently. At what point does your memory stop? What is the last thing you think you? What is the last thing you remember? Sarah says she doesn't remember. So Sarah doesn't remember when she stopped remembering. And her memory alone is her basis of defense in this case. Not only that is her sixth sense about how she can know exactly what George Torres is feeling, but she also knew he was crying wolf. Hide and seek after puzzles. He says, tag, you're it. You run and hide, correct? Does that mean you hide and he's supposed to find you? Sarah goes, no, that's just... So you both hide? No. How does this work? Sarah says, I don't know how to tell you. I was it and went to hide. The state says, my understanding of hide and seek is someone is it, and they will cover their eyes, count to 20, and then go find the person who is hiding. Is that your rules or house rules? Sarah seems a little pissy here and says she understands the rules of hide and seek. He says, explain your expectation. You would go upstairs and hide, and your expectation was for him to come find you? It was. After a while, he didn't find you, and you went downstairs and could see he was trying to hide in the suitcase, correct? You zipped him up and thought it was funny. We both thought it was funny. At this point, they release Sarah into the well. So basically, that means she's now down in front of the judge by that little stand they talk from. The suitcase is sat down in front of her. The prosecutor is wearing gloves with much difficulty trying to open the suitcase. Sarah is shown how it looks inside and asks, how was he? How was he in there? She kind of indicates a prone position with his head up. The defense wants her to explain how it was zipped. They get Sarah gloves. The paper clips weren't attached, so they add them back. Owen says that since they were removed, we don't know if that was the proper way they were attached, and now they're asking her to pull. Judge is like, is there an objection? Yes, approach. They ask her to show where the zippers were when it zipped up. The prosecutor is willing to take her direction. Basically, they're saying, we just want to know where the hole was, right? Sarah has difficulty and says it wasn't that hard back then. They ask her where is it when it was done zipping. It shut. Owens comes over to help her, says his hand was coming out of the corner. So the way it looked to me from Sarah's depiction, you would have the suitcase, right? His head would be here, and the hole was down here, like at the corner where it turns. So my thought was that she zipped it probably both ends of the zipper all the way to the end up here. And then there was a gap near where his face would be. And then he would, stick his fingers through. But it sounds like the hole was actually down here, closer to where his hand is, away from his mouth. That's different. That's not what I assumed. I don't think it helps her. Did you ever change the position of the zipper? I did not. So after he was in there some amount of time, you don't remember before taking the 2-minute video, correct? So he was in there for an unknown amount of time, and then we got the video. That's when we all heard what was said. Between the two videos, he got angry, and you hit him with the bat, yes? You didn't hit him before he was in the suitcase with the bat, correct? So each time he was hit, it was through the suitcase with the bat. That is what left the marks. Sarah says she can demonstrate. Do not. If you're ever on the stand for murdering your boyfriend by beating him with a baseball bat, do not offer to, without being, provoked to do this, offer to go up and pick up the baseball bat and show how you beat him in the suitcase. For anyone that needs it. They did the second video, went to bed. Upstairs, she made a phone call, then bed. Sarah doesn't remember if she said anything to him afterwards to George. She doesn't remember. She didn't do anything to help him escape from the predicament she zipped him up in. Now, Owens is up. Says that, well, you hit his hand while it was outside the suitcase and the rest was inside the suitcase. She poked him hard enough to bruise her own hand. So Owens is like, listen, she did hit him outside the suitcase when his hand was reaching out. Owens asked to approach, and the jury's done, right? So now we're talking about the next day. I'll talk about it, then I'll talk about the case. Talk of medical records that haven't been addressed, and the state needs to know what they're utilizing. Owen speaks to Sarah and says they don't wish to introduce any time George went to the hospital that was in relation to some sort of domestic violence with Sarah Boone. They've expressed that to Sarah. Judge asked anything else, and he said he just wanted that explained to her. That lawyers make those decisions. The other lawyer at the table is face-palming. He believes him and Sarah are now in agreement. Judge is talking about her rights, the rights of the lawyer. There's a trial decision to not pursue those medical records. The lawyer gets to decide. Sarah Boone understands and is satisfied with her defense strategy. So what is this about? Basically, her and Owens were disagreeing. Sarah, I don't know why she thinks this is smart, wants to introduce evidence of the time that George Torres was in the hospital. But none of it's good for her, right? Like, if it's in the hospital for the facial reconstruction, which we know was in there, that was caused by Sarah Boone causing an incident between him and his brother. Other times involving deaths, how would him going to the hospital in a domestic violence situation with Sarah Boone help Sarah Boone? And I think Owens is right. There's a lot of criticisms I can give Owens and his team for not being prepared and things not making sense to me. This one makes perfect sense, but it also sounds like very Sarah Boone. I'll just throw more things out there. They have to believe my version of this. He knows, I'm assuming Owens knows, that as soon as the prosecution responds, it's all going to fall apart. On to that. State talks about scheduling information. Defense wants to rest by Friday. They will address some information Thursday. 2 officers will be there to testify tomorrow. The defense wants to call the detective back for some impeachment issues. I believe it's Copesel. They probably want to call her back and argue about, well, did you tell her you were pregnant and she should come and trick her? Even if she tricked her to come in, it doesn't matter. We've already established that, and I don't know why they're going to harp on it. Maybe they're going to complain more about Miranda, which we know doesn't matter. I don't understand bringing her back. I don't think it's going to help them, but hey, they want to do it. A defense witness is flying in from New Jersey, and he wants to know if they can depose her on the morning. They have her testify that afternoon. The state says that's an unreasonable time frame demand. State says she was supposed to be here today, but she wasn't, and they're just going to address that tomorrow. They went a little late today. So yeah, I think Sarah Boone, it went bad. The only time I could say it felt like maybe she had emotion were situations she was talking about her animals. She's saying she still loves this man, and she's offering to go pick up a bat and beat the suitcase that he died in with the bat she beat him with. Sarah Boone admits to not knowing what happened, admits not knowing time. The time frames she remembers are only time frames that she knew the detectives had, or time frames she can add in herself that help her. When it comes to something that she didn't know was on video, she doesn't know about it. She didn't know about the photo. She didn't know about Publix because those didn't help her. Her going out and getting wine with George doesn't help her. The photo of George in the suitcase before the video doesn't help her. Best case scenario, she doesn't remember those times. Worst case scenario, she remembers them and purposefully doesn't talk about it because she knows it hurts her case. Same with when we get to the videos. Best case scenario, she was lying and she knew these videos were bad and she just lied that she didn't remember taking them, even though that doesn't make sense because she knew the police had it. Worst case scenario, she didn't know at all. And then we have that gap between the videos where they're banking everything. The overt act is in that. And it's supposed to be a threat that she has changed the wording on multiple times. They changed the overt act from being his hand sticking out. That's what Owen said in court. Previously, they changed that to him threatening her. But Sarah can't even get the threat right, almost like she can't remember. Or it was made up in a short period of time and can't remember the story. It's interesting to me that Sarah has an ever-evolving story that only ever helps her or corroborates evidence that disproved her last story. I don't think this works. I don't think it works. And the thing is, everything shown after this, in a way, is tainted. Because it's not just a bad look for Sarah, it's a bad look for her lawyers. And when they bring someone up, and if their story doesn't match Sarah's, why would they believe anyone on Sarah's side? I'm at a loss. I'm at a loss for I saw some comments like they think Sarah Boone after the photos, even at the end, they think she's innocent. I can't get there. I'm sorry. If anything, I am more certain of her doubt than ever before. From what I've seen, from the evidence. But hey, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm just focused on her tone. What do you think? I'm going to end the video off here. What time is it? It's pretty late, I think. Later than I wanted to end, but they went late. I don't know when this will come up. I'm going to edit everything together and get myself some water and turn down the lights and rest my eyes, and maybe my fingers will stop hurting, and I guess get ready for the next day, right? I'm going to try to cover it, doing what I can when I can. I'm just blown away with this case. That final little bit where her lawyers are disagreeing with her, right? I think that says a lot. She is what we thought she was, if not worse. But yeah, with all that being said, like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you think. If you're in the chat, there's comments below. Talk with people. People, even when the chat's active, people are active down in the comments from what I've seen, so there might be something down there for you. Again, if you want to support this channel, I have membership. I have super chats. I also have, and I know a lot of people don't like to use third-party stuff, I have Buy Me a Coffee if you want to support me. Buy Me a Coffee is the smallest cut, I believe. So if that's important to you, there's an option there. I do have other stuff I want to cover. I don't know if I'll get to it. There's some interesting J6 stuff coming on. There's a, for example, a woman in her, she wrote a letter to the judge for her sentencing and compares her treatment to the gulags in Russia and Tiananmen Square. A lot of people ask, like, well, did I follow content like this before? The thing that got me so interested in, like, defendants that I think are just out there, some of these J6 trials, they just get me. Don't know if I'll cover that today. Maybe not. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of Sarah Boone, and Sarah Boone's taking most of my day. I mean, right now, this is from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. 7:05 right now. So I have spent today 10 hours, Sarah Boone. Gonna have to render this. Once that's done, tags, description, get it uploaded, title, thumbnail. I don't know how long that'll take. And then I'm in chat. I'm gonna be in chat. I'm planning to if nothing happens. And that's another however long this video is. I don't even know how long the video is. It's fun. I enjoy it. I enjoy the coverage. I enjoy watching it. It's just it's your whole day. And that's what the videos are for, right? I know people can't commit their whole day, and I know some people do commit their whole day like I am, and then they just want to talk about it and see someone else's opinion. But until the next video.